We're going to start big picture. We're going to ask you about the overall assessment of the region, of China and Taiwan. We're going to get into some details about weapons and the president-elect, and then we'll zoom out again, and you can deliver the message on democracy that you are here being awarded for. So let's start with that overall zoomed-out picture. How do you assess the threat of China's increasing aggressiveness and coerciveness, and what timeline do you believe Xi Jinping is on?
The timelines have been has been an issue that is widely discussed among experts and governments. We have all sorts of timelines. The shortest one, the most recent one, will probably be 2027, and nobody would guarantee that there will be something that happened by then. But there are others who may have a longer time frame for the possible happening of a conflict. But we can, as leaders, or we just cannot guess, and we have to get ourselves prepared. So when we're facing with issue like this, we're using several timelines to make our preparation in stages. So this is what we're doing now, and we try to be as best prepared as possible.
So we'll talk about Taiwan preparations, we'll talk about American preparations, but I think it's also important to ask, when we're thinking about this overall assessment, this wide-angle lens right now, for you to explain how has the Taiwanese population shifted since Hong Kong and Ukraine?
Well, I think the Hong Kong situation, especially in the year, it was 2019, the event there has reminded the Taiwanese that, we just cannot be too optimistic about people that may have an intention to take over Taiwan. So, and the Ukrainian case is another one, and it's another reminder to the Taiwanese people that we should get ourselves prepared if we think that our democracy and freedom are something that we need to do things to protect. So I think, unfortunately or fortunately, the happening of these two events serves as a tiny reminder to the Taiwanese people that democracy of ours requires a lot of efforts by the society and people as a whole.
So I think that's a great wide-angle lens view of the situation. Let's go zoom in, and let's start with Ukraine. You talked tonight, you've said repeatedly that the U.S. must support Ukraine until the very end. If the next Trump administration were to stop supporting Ukraine, and or if Ukraine were forced to accept some kind of peace in which it had to give up territory, what would be the impact in Beijing and Taipei?
As I said in my speech just now, essentially I'm trying to say is authoritarians should not be encouraged. They should be deterred. So I hope in the future, when we're looking for resolution of the current conflict in Ukraine, I hope people will bear in mind that democracy and freedom and sovereignty of the Ukrainian people should be respected. And any proposal for resolution has to be agreed by the Ukrainian people. The U.S. has to continue to support the Ukrainians. In my speech, I actually said that the whole community of democracy should get together to generate the best support that we can have for Ukraine. So they will be encouraged, and they will be having more confidence in themselves and also their friends around the world. And then they will be more determined and brave. This is the kind of Ukrainians we like to see. And I hope that apparently they're facing a very difficult situation, but I hope that they don't lose their determination and confidence.
I don't think anyone's doubting Ukraine's determination. I guess, how do you think Beijing would respond if the world, Washington, the West, did drop some of its support for Ukraine?
Of course, people would argue that this was, if too much compromise is made in the case of Ukraine, I'm sure people would tend to think that the potential aggressors would be encouraged. So that is why I said in my speech just now, a victory in Ukraine would serve as the best deterrence for possible future conflicts.
Admiral Paparo, who has been here at this conference, said this week something that the United States has not said in the past. He acknowledged that the Patriots, the air-to-air missiles that are being sent to Ukraine, some of which actually are being used in Israel as well, the fact that those are going to Ukraine are, quote, eating into stocks. It imposes costs on the readiness of America to respond in the Indo-Pacific. Do you fear at all that the defense of Taiwan is being disadvantaged by U.S. efforts in Ukraine and the Middle East?
Well, the U.S. May have this issue of whether they have enough in stock. But my thought is that they should do whatever they can to help the Ukrainian. We still have time to prepare for ourselves with the rest of the world.
So it's important that the United States continue these weapons to Ukraine, even if, as Admiral Paparo admitted, there might be a little less readiness.
As I said, we still have time. We still have time to get ourselves better prepared, of course, with the help of our friends.
You raised gray zone maneuvers by Beijing, and I wonder if you could tell the audience, are you more worried about a Chinese invasion or a Chinese blockade?
These are all possibilities, and the assumptions that we have to make when we're making preparations.
Well, I ask because much of deterring Beijing, as you have talked about extensively, is about imposing costs or convincing them that they would face costs regardless of what choice of the two that they make. What do you believe is the level of pain that Beijing couldn't tolerate?
Well, I think Beijing has its own calculation of costs. And when we are talking about costs, you have monetary costs, you have political costs, you have all sorts of costs. Now, in the minds of the politicians, the calculation is always a very complicated one. And it's not only in financial terms. There are other things like political costs and others to consider. And they may have different priorities.
You're using plural. I think the focus would be on one man, Xi Jinping, and his assessment of cost. Do you care to share your assessment on what he might consider too costly?
Well, I think Xi Jinping has a very complicated and challenging agenda himself. So my advice is that he probably will spend more time on his domestic challenges first. Yeah.
We, in terms of imposing costs, of course, one of them is military and readiness of both the United States and Taiwan. So let's talk about Taiwan's readiness. You talked about the 80% increase in the defense budget, 8% each year, big ticket items, but crucially, from Taiwan's perspective and Washington's perspective, asymmetric capabilities. Can you tell us whether Taiwan plans a big purchase of weapons in the near future, Patriots, Stingers, perhaps even F-35s? And do you think Taiwan will or should wait until the inauguration to make that purchase?
Until the inauguration?
Until Donald Trump becomes president again.
I sort of responded to your question in my speech. I said we will continue our investment, continue to invest in our defense as required by our security needs.
Yes.
So that means that you do need to have a constant assessment of what your security needs are. And then you make a decision as to what sort of weaponry, or what extent, or in what sort of volumes that you need to purchase. And what is most important is that whether you would find someone who is so willingly to provide that weaponry to you. And in the case of Taiwan, we seem to be a very sensitive buyer, and some people may have some hesitation or have to think twice before they agree to sell those weaponries. And the United States seems to be a more generous one. Again, we do have money to spend, but we have to spend the money wisely. So it's a continuing assessment with our security partners as to what is needed. And then we will, try to get ourselves equipped with these things that we need to defend ourselves. Monetary costs, given the situation of Taiwan, I think we probably can afford it.
You can afford a big purchase.
Not necessarily big, I mean necessary purchases.
President-elect Trump has said quite a few things about Taiwan. I won't repeat all of them because I want to focus on one substantive one that he said to the Washington Post. He said Taiwan needed to boost GDP spending on defense to 10%. Do you think Taiwan should and can it?
Well, if our security assessment tells us that we have to increase, then we will increase. But we would have some difficulty of accepting an arbitrary figure.
Is there there's a lot of obvious follow-ups there, but is there a figure that you think is...
This is an arbitrary figure. I'm not hinting that. It has to be backed by a very careful calculation of what we need.
And do you think there is that calculation in terms of a number? I mean, is there...
We haven't done a careful calculation yet.
Let me ask about a trend that we see from the United States across the Trump and Biden administrations. Unprecedented steps to support Taiwan. Some of them private, but others in public. And I wonder if you believe there should be any limits on how much support the U.S. shows publicly in order to avoid a response from Beijing? Is there a point where essentially American love, public American love, might become dangerous or excessive?
Given the experiences we have so far, the kind of responses that you mentioned, many of the time is always carefully contemplated, and many of the time there's consultation before it is released. So the kind of worries that you mentioned, I have to admit is a worry, but you don't have to worry too much, because between friends and partners, there are always consultations before a position is announced or made public.
So it sounds like what you're saying is there could be worries about it, but so long as Washington and Taipei coordinate, you're not worried. Okay.
Yeah, and this has been the practice.
I'm running out of time here, so just two quick last ones. There's a conventional wisdom that a slowdown in China's economy is a good thing when it comes to Taiwan's security, because it likely delays any military action against Taiwan. But do you agree with that?
Well, this is one of the possibilities, but you can't make decisions only rely on one possibility. You have to prepare for other possibilities as well.
Meaning it actually might be the opposite. That a downturn in China could actually accelerate it.
Yes, a leader has to prepare all the contingencies and make plans to deal with all sorts of possibilities.
And I guess I'll let you leave us before I turn to just a couple questions.
You promise you're not going to grill me.
This is not a grilling.
You're actually grilling me.
I won't say anything. There have been grillings in this chair, and I hope this is not seen as a grilling. Lastly, look, you're being rewarded for your efforts for democracy. You've fought efforts inside Taiwan, domestically and internationally, to try and damage Taiwanese democracy. Your message tonight is that democracies need to be more unified than authoritarians. Bottom line, do you have faith that that can happen?
Well, things will not happen without making any efforts. It's the efforts that count. And I'm saying that just to remind the democracies, they got work to do. And it's a very necessary work to do.
Great.